Well, welcome this morning, everyone, to AgileDad's live video stream. So we're excited to go ahead and discuss another wonderful topic. So we got a few people in this morning's discussion. So we have Ty Grigg, so
Hello.
myself, Jacob Anderson, and we also have Stephanie Lindstrom, who's actually joining us.
Yeah, and I just wanted to go ahead and remind everyone that you can also find this content in a podcast if you prefer to just listen. And we upload there. It's called the Agile Roundtable podcast, and we've saved a seat for you at the table. So if you'd like to participate, remember that you can leave comments and suggestions of what you'd like us to discuss in future episodes in the comments. Go ahead and let us know what you'd like to hear.
Excellent.
Yeah.
That's a good reminder. So we're trying to actually make sure that things are available in lots of different formats. So to be able to go ahead and share thoughts and ideas on what to do to go ahead and move forward and see some success for yourself in your own role, as well as with teams that actually exist. So let's get started on our topic this morning. So our topic is release planning. So in looking at release planning, I think Ty is actually dealing with some environmental things going on here. We had an air conditioner kick on, so those emergencies come up all the time, and it's kind of loud in the background. So let's start talking a little bit about release planning. Okay, Stephanie, tell us a little bit of what are we trying to accomplish here with release planning? What's the real purpose behind this?
Sure. So you have to start out when it comes to release planning of understanding that there's three aspects that go into it. And the outcome is going to be you're going to have a accurate, not necessarily precise outcome when it comes to knowing when you're going to have your release, whether it be a product, project, whatever it may be. That being said, so what do we need to have to do that? What are the parameters around that? So it would be you've got to have a time box, a start and an end date to know when you want to start the project and when you're going to tell your stakeholders that it's going to be ready for market. We also need to know that a scope of work that wants to be accomplished during that time box is established at the beginning. So you don't have extra projects or extra tasks come up. You say from the beginning, we want X, Y, Z, and E to happen. And you make sure those happen and not necessarily all the letters in between. So really staying on task keeps a project moving, and it keeps it to the point where it's going to come out in that time box that we're setting. At the end, it's really important and really is kind of the critical piece here.
Quick question for you, Stephanie.
Yeah.
So I know oftentimes with release planning, you'll have people actually ask about, what's the difference as far as fixed cost, fixed scope, everything else like that. What's the difference? Because, if we're talking about this, with having a time frame and having some potential scope, what are we really hoping to see is the difference here?
The difference between this and what?
Between this and maybe a standard approach, okay. I guess as far as stage gates and having everything defined beforehand. What are we really hoping to accomplish there?
Well, I'll chime in a little bit on that one because, a lot of times when you're in traditional waterfall or traditional planning, you're trying to, we have that triple constraint that you've kind of alluded to.
Sure.
Where we're constrained on our time and on our resources, as well as I'm blanking on the third one right now. But anyway, you're trying to plan each one of those perfectly and hope that you're going to hit all three of them at the same time. But we don't know everything in advance. So in this case, we're fixing our time. We have it, like Stephanie said, a time box. Like maybe we're going to plan our next month or our next 3 months, what we're going to release in there. So the scope will be variable in that time, and we're going to plan, or we're basically trying to figure out how much can get done in that fixed amount of time.
Yep. And it really, I think, tied to just to add on to that, it allows teams to be nimble. It's like you said, things are going to change. So it allows for that ability to be agile and to adjust as changes happen.
Good. And I like that you made the comment about, oftentimes in order for something to really be successful with the release, you mentioned, maybe there's X, Y, Z, and E, right? Or at least that's what we recognize up front for the potential release that I think they oftentimes get referred to as kind of the must-haves or whatever it is for a potential release. So what else do we need there, Stephanie? So what else are we hoping to get?
Sure. So, I mean, one of the biggest value that's going to be coming from this is you need to have a customer sign off. What does your customer want? Are you making a Apple phone or an iPod or a watch? How are they wanting to get that information? It's just an example I threw out there, but you really have to have the customer sign off so you know that when that comes out in the marketplace, you're going to have a viable base that wants to engage with you.
Good. And that speaks volumes to, and there's some people that just absolutely hate this phrase, but I think it's commonly misused. The whole idea of a minimum viable product getting out to market, right, and being able to see how something rolls out is extremely important to be able to see the success that happens, right? So that minimum viable product suggests that it's something that people can actually consume or use, and it's not something that is bare bones. It is actually something that's truly tangible, right? That's actually going on. That's the big thing we want to see from what's truly happening. Okay. What else? Are we missing anything else there, Stephanie? So you talked about we have an idea of potential work. I like the time box. I'm really big on time boxes. I enjoy that. So because to be quite honest, there's times that I'm just not good with time, right? And people are like, "Hey, Jacob, we always know you're going to be there," and I'm like, "What do you mean? I always know I'm going to be there?" "Yeah, like 2 minutes late." I was like, "No, I'm not always 2 minutes late. So sometimes I'm 2 minutes early." So, but it's one of those things that a time box is actually really important to have an idea as to how we're measuring ourselves. So I think that's key to being able to see some success.
Yeah, then we can get some consistency.
True.
Kind of like you're saying, and especially if we've done multiple releases, and we start to get a really good idea of how much we can get done in that given amount of time.
Sure.
But if you're planning your first one, you probably still can at least make an educated guess.
Yeah.
If you've got if you've done a few sprints, you should have an idea of your velocity.
That's true.
Maybe it's not exact, but you can make a good guess, and then you can just extrapolate that velocity out. Maybe you've got we've done 3 sprints so far with our new team with Agile, and so maybe so far we've got about maybe 25 points per sprint.
Sure.
So we're going to try and plan out 6 sprints, a release of 6 sprints. So 25 times 6. That's how much we've got to work with.
Seems pretty straightforward, right?
Yeah.
Seems very straightforward.
It does, but yet I think a lot of people just aren't thinking that way because they don't see it as a simple math problem.
Oh, good point. Good
They
point.
see it as just like this nebulous thing. Oh, we got to get everything done, and that's the end of the discussion. Like, oh, it has to get done by this date.
Sure.
But that's 6 times 25. That's about 150 points. But if we're talking about a 400-point request, it's not going to happen.
No.
And not all of it, at least. So that's where you really got to have to start prioritizing, and so you can pick the most important 150 points for release 1, and then maybe for version 2 in your second release, you can get the next 150 points.
Well, and I think that's really important too. This really provides a vehicle for suggesting that to leadership, to management, to executives, to stakeholders. Yeah. So that if there are other priorities that come up, they have to understand that during this release, this is what's possible from this team. And if we need to reprioritize, okay, we can do that, but have to understand that we can only get so much done during this 3-month period of time.
That's true. And I oftentimes hear, I've seen this recently, so I've seen it in a few different companies, so that we revisit the release plan to try to get different information, right? And when it gets revisited way too often, so we have to ask ourselves what the potential benefit is that we're actually getting from it, right? So I saw one particular example where I think they had gone through it either 3 or 4 times, and it didn't change the information all that much, right? Mm-hmm. So, and I'm like, are you just wanting to rearrange deck chairs just to tell you it all fits on the deck?
It's going to fit this time, I swear.
Yeah, maybe we can fold the chairs and stack them together, and maybe it'll work this time. And you're like, there's still only so much capacity that actually exists. That's for sure. So we have to actually be very careful that we're not just thinking that somehow we can, it's rows and columns instead of columns and rows, right? So we have to be very careful there. I saw one team where they had gone through and kind of done a full view of multiple things over a period of time. It was about a 3 to 4 month period, and they had a good idea as to what was going to happen, but now they were trying to prove it out with user stories. So, and as they got into the user stories, there were some things that were already done. There were some things that weren't done that they didn't identify, but the time frame was roughly the same, plus or minus a month or two, right? So, and this happens. So this is why it's important to go ahead and get things in front of a team as early as possible. Now, I know Ty started talking a little bit about velocity and estimation. What are your thoughts on velocity and estimation, Stephanie? Because I know that it's an interesting balance that you actually go ahead and have to make sure that you're estimating enough, that you have the right level of detail. What have you seen? What are you seeing right now?
Sure. I'm seeing with a specific team I'm working with here in the Tampa Bay area that is, they're in probably, I believe that we're in sprint 10 right now. It took to about sprint 5 to understand their velocity and to understand what a team can get to. So now when we go through a sprint planning, it's really easy to say, okay, maybe we're off a couple here and there because things do come up, and estimation, again, it's not precise, right? It's just, it's accurate. It's getting in the ballpark. So we're able to stay in that ballpark. So I think teams do need to be, not only teams and leadership need to be patient as new teams are going through the sprint process, that it might take a couple to get them to the point where they are actually able to be more accurate.
Good. I like that. It's not perfection out of the gate, right? And I don't think it really ever is. So
no, I don't think so either.
Yeah, I mean, estimation is just that. It's an estimate, right? So I'm a big fan of baseball. So many people know this about me, right? And when you're looking at ballparks, right? Not all of them are the same exact dimensions. They're roughly the same dimensions, but if you're at Yankee Stadium or you're at Citi Field, right, or you're at Dodger Stadium at Chavez Ravine, or you're Wrigley Field, or you're trying to hit a home run over the Green Monster at Fenway Park, I mean, you got different measurements here, right? So that's the thing to keep in mind. They're roughly the same, but it's a different experience. Right? There's nothing necessarily wrong with that. So, but it's that atmosphere and what's actually going on as a result of that helps to prove out whether the estimate is close enough to be able to help us to go ahead and move forward. And that's really what the estimate's intended for, is to help us be able to say, do we have enough information to start acting, right? And that's what you really want for a potential release.
I also just what I've noticed in teams that I've worked with and ones that are able to be more accurate, it really also helps the team morale. A team doesn't want to see every sprint that they're not meeting what the goals they set to accomplish. So once you get in that cadence to accurately estimate, it really helps the team. I think their work desire and their feeling to keep on keeping on, because they know they're going to be able to make it to the finish line.
Yeah. And, also it helps to not have, you kind of have that buffer, instead of having management just always shoving more stuff down the pipeline or whatever, and just feel like you're never going to get any of it done. You have like that discrete amount of work in a release that we're going to finish this and then we're going to move on to the next chunk. I really like that. I think that sometimes we kind of talking a little bit so far, we don't want to use it as an excuse. And I don't think we mean to say that, oh, we can't do that because it's not in our velocity. But the real value is not using it as an excuse, but rather it's in being predictable and being able to plan what realistically can be done,
Right.
so that you can
Right.
count on that, right? And I think that's valuable to leadership as well as the team, because then you get a realistic idea of what can be done and how long it will take, and then you can count on that.
I like that.
Predictability is I mean, it's paramount in any industry. Predictability helps you to know what you can count on in the future. And I know people don't like just planning for, the next 2 weeks or the next 4 weeks. I mean, being a father of 8 kids, it's you can't help but go and look at something and say, I can't plan just for the next 2 days, right? So, and my wife will be the first one to tell you that if you want to get something on our calendar, you better tell us as early as possible, right? So, because there's a lot of stuff that goes on. I mean,
Yeah.
3 kids in high school, so 4 kids in elementary, 1 in junior high school, and you're looking at that. That's just a snapshot of life. When you think about work oftentimes mirrors that, right? And if we're trying to roll something out and have something be successful, so how many times do we get pulled off into different initiatives?
Right.
How do we go ahead and prioritize what we actually move forward with? So then it's not just, halfway towards something, or, working on 3 things at the same time and doing all of them in a mediocre fashion, instead of actually going through and truly getting, one of them really successful, right? And that's what you really want to see, is be able to see things be successful, so we can see, what type of feedback do we get from rolling things out. Well, I know we've
Really,
yeah, go
I'm
ahead,
sorry.
Steph.
I was just saying, I
you're
think it's
fine.
really important for folks to, recognize that when the importance of that understanding and the predictability
Sure.
is, that's why having a great product owner is really helpful, because they're able to understand what's going on. They're able to understand the leadership and really act as that liaison between what's realistic.
I like that.
Yeah.
I really like that.
And kind of going back to your point too there, Jacob, maybe we can't plan every detail, but if we stay high enough level, then we can get a good idea of what's coming up and what can be done. If we think in bigger chunks, we can get estimates for those big chunks, and maybe we don't plan the solution, we don't plan every little bit, every little line of code, but at least we can get the big modules, and have an idea of how big those are, and then kind of how they will all piece together.
Right.
And like Stephanie said, we work with the product owner. We have a well groomed backlog going into it, and then we can kind of just cut that top of the well groomed prioritized backlog off that will fit in the release.
Right. No, that's good. That's very good. So I know we've talked a lot about this, and I think it's been very, very beneficial. There's oftentimes an intended outcome that comes as a result of release planning. It's not just identifying potential work and identifying the velocity and how to go ahead and estimate behind it. Some of those dependencies actually get identified as a result of release planning. We oftentimes start kind of staging, multiple sprints and seeing if we know the velocity of the team about how much can be completed, from one sprint to the next, and then determine whether something's even feasible or not. Like when Ty talked about if we know the capacity is 150 points and it's a 400-point lift, well, that's nice. Unless you're going to have multiple teams work towards that particular initiative, there's no way all of a sudden, 400 is going to fit into a 150, point space. So it's just not going to happen, right? And if people push to say, well, what can we do to get it there? Well, the first question I ask is, what's the most important to you, right? Because it's not a matter of actually just fitting more in or fitting the square peg in the round hole. It's what's truly important to you, and how can we make sure that that's delivered upon first, and then be able to go ahead and move forward.
Yeah.
Now, the activity itself, or the planning stage that we get into, right? So we go from vision planning to roadmap planning. We hit release planning, and oftentimes you'll see teams at different stages, right? So I know Stephanie has a blog post about this recently, so that she talked about teams that are in kind of a high performing stage, those that are kind of evolving, so and kind of learning a little bit of what's really going on. to be able to see some of the success. And then oftentimes you have, situations where you have multiple teams so that are working towards a single solution. And it looks a little different, with each of those types of teams.
Right.
What are you seeing, Stephanie? So I mean, we're not going to, go through and like read off the blog post because, there's more things that people can research there. But what have you seen? What's successful and potentially what's not?
Sure. So I think, they're working with mature and not as mature teams is it is a horse of a different color, right? It's always going to look different. And so I think one thing that is important for the product owner, the scrum master, the team, as well as the stakeholders, internal and external, understand is that this process is going to, maybe it's going to take a mature team 25 minutes to go through a release planning because they know how to get to the end and they know what's going to be successful. For other teams, it may take a couple different stages of types of planning. They may have to do additional backlog grooming. There may have to be additional conversations between the product owner and the leadership, as well as the customer, right? So I think there just really needs to be a nice understanding of all parties involved that this is going to be a different egg for a different team.
Sure. And I like that you say that too, because oftentimes when teams get to that release planning stage, they might say, well, we don't have enough details to be able to move forward. So it's possible that, some of those unknown details that we get a rough idea, and then there's some, backlog grooming or refinement that needs to happen. So to be able to see some success to start proving out the plan that we have, right? Proving, how close are we? Do we need to make adjustments as far as what we're trying to go ahead and accomplish? So what have you seen, Ty? Because I know you've worked with several teams with release planning session, and sometimes it's been mixed results, right? So what have you seen that's been helpful?
What I've seen is that teams tend to want to get into too much detail in this meeting.
That's true, they do. Yes.
They want to start discussing how they're going to solve the problems, how they're going to write these solutions for even, they're getting into too much detail, and it makes the meeting take too long.
Yeah.
We want this to be a relatively quick planning session where we're really just talking about the high level items and kind of talking in epic points, you might say.
Sure.
How big a whole initiative or a whole program will be as a whole, and not the individual user stories. You can be talking about bigger user stories, or at least see them, but I would suggest to really just talking kind of like epic or big chunks that will kind of help you be a little higher level so that you can progress more quickly through the meeting.
Sure.
And then later in backlog grooming, you can talk about those individual user stories and really drill down into them.
Good.
Jacob, one thing I've also seen is when it comes to a team dynamic, that not only does it help the leadership and the customer have a realistic expectation of what is going to be happening over the next whatever period of time you're planning for, but it also helps teams come together and come to an agreement as to, somebody may think that something is, let's say if you're using a t-shirt size, there's a team, I know Jacob, you've seen this, where somebody said it's a small and somebody said it's an extra large, and they went back and forth and back and forth and back and forth, kind of got frustrated. They went out and took a break for 10 minutes and it's a medium, right? So that way everybody understands when you talk about what all is involved, that there is a happy medium, and the happy medium is okay at this point.
That's true. True.
It's a good opportunity to talk about what is involved in each of these each of these chunks, or each of these even user stories, and make sure that we're all having the same understanding of what is going into this release. And during the course of these conversations during a release planning session, I've had experiences where the team has decided, and management's involved too. So, and everyone in the room is able to see, yes, like all of this won't fit, but this is important and this is important, and they definitely need to be in this release. And these other things can slide into either a maybe column or we can't do this quarter.
Right. And that's good. The transparency is what we're really looking for there, right? So with anything with release planning, it gets us an idea of what's possible. So, and it starts setting some expectations, right? So if we think there's roughly 6 months to go ahead and do something, or 3 months, and we get an idea as to what's there. So, and when all of a sudden looking at it is much more complex and there's much more involved, it forces a decision to be made, right?
Mhm.
And sometimes, to be quite honest, that decision is, maybe we're not going to work on it right now. Maybe there's something else that's more important, or is there something else that is tangible that allows us to get some incremental value before we go ahead and move forward with the larger solution, right? So that's good. Well, excellent. Well, I know we're about hitting our time frame that we like to go ahead and wrap up, but I think this has been some really good discussion, right? So I hope it's been valuable for everyone that has actually joined. So keep in mind that release planning, it's a bit of an art. It's art and science mixed together, right? So, and it's not a matter of just going through with the specific practices of estimating and prioritizing and creating a release plan, but it's the value really comes out of the discussions that ensue and the things that we discover, right? So this is the people really talking so that we actually see, what do we understand from how we go ahead and move forward, right? So you have a rough plan, and then we see how are we going to execute as individuals and as a team or as multiple teams to be able to see success that comes out of it. Okay.
Yeah. So yeah, just walk in with a wish list. Make sure you have all of the requests together and put them up on the board and start talking about them. And
exactly.
And yeah, and if you have any questions about it, or just give it a try. If you have any questions, let us know. We'd be happy to answer them. You can either email us or message us here on Facebook, or find us on our website.
Exactly.
You can contact us there, and we'd be happy to help.
And if you're in the Tampa area, you need to talk to Stephanie.
Yes, you do.
Right, Stephanie?
Yes.
That is correct.
Very good. If you're in Salt Lake, you talk to Ty, you talk to me, you talk to Eliza. If you're in Tampa, you talk to Lee, you talk to Stephanie. So we have Roy up in North Carolina. So, and some other folks that occasionally work together with us on a more full-time basis. But we're always happy to go ahead and have a discussion over the phone or a video session, or even come over there in person and actually discuss a little bit more with you and try to identify what is something that can help you to be more successful and get a better picture of what you're trying to go ahead and accomplish, right? And it can be done in a relatively short period of time to be able to see, what takeaways are you hoping to accomplish. Well, we're going to go ahead and wrap up this morning. But it's been a pleasure, as always, speaking with you, Stephanie and Ty. So thank you for humoring me at this early hour in the morning. So, and Ty's going, it's earlier than you think it is, Jacob.
Yes, it is.
It's earlier than you think it is. Yes, it is. Well, very good. Well, I hope everyone has a wonderful day, and we'll look forward to talking a little bit more next week. So our topic next week that we're going to be covering is related to team size. And we're going to be discussing the topic of, is it one large team or is it two small teams, right? So, and how do we go ahead and best cover that type of a topic? And we'll go through and discuss that in a little bit more detail and hopefully answer some questions that actually come up. So what we're going to start doing is we'll start posting some things in advance. I know the session today was posted as when it was going to be starting, and I think somehow we got the time zone off a little bit, but we'll actually get that refined and help people to see a little bit more success that comes as a result of it. Okay. So thank you again, everyone, for joining us, and we'll look forward to talking to you again next week.
Great. Thank you.
Have a good one, Stephanie. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.